There you go.
Thank you. Well, one, thanks everybody for being here today, and thanks to the team for having me. I'm honored and privileged to be the first English speaking guest of your event. And for those who I haven't met, my name is James Kaikis. I'm the co-founder of PreSales Collective and PreSales Academy. What has been an idea to bring pre-sales professionals together across the globe has turned into something much more than just that. And so I myself was in pre-sales for about 6 or 7 years prior to starting PreSales Collective. So I was at a company called Showpad based in Belgium. I was the first sales engineer there and helped build the global organization. And then I was a director over at Salesforce for about a year and a half before I went full time less than a year ago, last February. And it's been really amazing to see pre-sales come together because I think so many of us really enjoy this role. We enjoy this job, and we like to say it's the best job that no one's ever heard of. And it's so different. It's so different across the globe. And we felt like Pre-Sales Collective, we could actually create this group and this organization to help folks like Jan and Tim, who started Sales Excellence Podcast. We're talking about this. Come together, everyone. Come together to really elevate the role of pre-sales. So I just have a couple of slides to give you a little introduction on who's who, and we'll kind of go from there. Pre-Sales Collective is actually now a 6-person company. At this time last year, UG had just gone full-time with Pre-Sales Collective on the 1st. He was at Outreach previously, and I resigned after my year ended at Salesforce in February. And so we also added Maddie Stremick. She went through Pre-Sales Academy and is now on our team as our head of programming. And Kevin Mefford, who is our head of community. Kevin was involved in a local chapter of Austin, Texas in the United States. He was involved in one of our big projects and decided to come full time. And we actually just added 2 more folks. One of them started yesterday, Courtney Flickwer. She's our member experience manager. And then next Tuesday, Shauna James, our community and events manager, starts. So we are a 6-person community. And really our goal and mission is to continue to elevate the role of pre-sales profession worldwide. And the reason why we are 6 people is that Pre-Sales Collective has grown quite large in a short period of time. So over 17,000 members across the globe. I was looking at the country breakdown yesterday, or maybe it was Sunday, and I believe we had over 80 countries. And so I'm looking to continue to dive into those numbers. But pre-sales professionals all across the world are coming together. We have so much content, and most of that content is in English, but we have a lot of plans for this upcoming year to do more localized content, German, French, Spanish, Dutch. And it's just been really quite incredible to see everybody coming together and all the content that has happened across the globe. And this is one of the things I like to show folks is that Pre-Sales Collective is a very diverse community. It's broken up of folks from all over the world, but individual contributors, leaders, people who want to get into pre-sales, small companies, big companies. And we actually have a Slack community that has over 7,700 professionals in it. And our podcast is actually going to cross about 100,000 listens in the next 1 to 2 months. So we're pretty excited about that. Again, just evangelizing the role of pre-sales. And really, one of the things that I want to highlight specifically today is that we have a very aggressive plan for 2022 because we want to continue to provide resources to everyone across the globe. And so we're actually rolling out a new website and a member portal in March. So as German speaking pre-sales professionals, you can actually, when you log into the member portal, you'll have a content tab, which will have all the German speaking content that's been around the pre-sales collective. So no longer is it just English facing content. So if you're a leader, individual contributor, we'll have that. And we're continuing to put out content about how to make the most of Pre-Sales Collective and how to engage and to learn and rolling out new content types throughout the year. And also in-person events when it's safe, with such a spread out contingent. It's virtual is very easy, like events today, but every once in a while, some people just want to go and grab a beer or a pint at a local pub and get to know folks. And so we're helping create that process, and we'll be continuing to add folks to our team. So we're looking to be about a 10-person team by the end of the year. So a little bit aggressive, but that's our hope, all in the name of pre-sales. And I just want to highlight one quick thing that you may have heard happening around in North America is we released this program called PreSales Academy. And how many people do we know who really love this role, enjoy this role, but do have trouble breaking into it? And so right now this only exists in North America, but we have goals in 22 and 2023 to bring this globally. And so we're helping reskill folks, bring them into pre-sales. And so we actually just had our first cohort graduate in December. We had our second cohort start yesterday. And we're really, again, on a mission to help bring people from all types of backgrounds to get into this role and get into this profession by providing them opportunity. And also companies hire. There are a lot of companies out there that have a lot of open pre-sales roles, yet they put these job descriptions out there that require like 5 to 10 years experience. So it's really hard to join. And so really that's what PreSales Academy is all about. And we really want to bring this worldwide, ideally at the end of this year or early next year, so that we're helping people break into this profession everywhere. But where I do want to highlight, right, is this. We believe that pre-sales, this is my last slide, we'll open up for questions. We do believe that PreSales Collective should be a platform highlighting the amazing people that are in this profession. Whether you are wanting to learn and digest content, or maybe you want to join a podcast or you want to be on a webinar, we are creating those opportunities. So we actually have a new process called PreSales Collective Contribute. I'll send the URL. But if you say, hey, you know what? Ricotta is amazing when it comes to value engineering, and her insight is tremendous. I work with her all the time at our company, and I think that she should be on the PreSales Collective to talk about it. You can actually nominate folks to get involved and get engaged. And we're actually going to be doing more content in specific languages. So I've talked to Ricotta, Tim, and Jan about this. This is a great event that happens monthly, but every other month, PreSales Collective will also put out content in German and in Spanish and French, because again, we want to continue to highlight the people that are in this profession and service them. We really, I don't want to say we've gotten lucky, right? But we have this idea to help pre-sales professionals, and now it's just continued to take off and grow. And our biggest goal is to just listen, right? Be curious, understand what people want, what people need, and be able to service that. And so if you have desires to get involved or get engaged, I'll go ahead and send the URL and the mechanism to help do that. We also have an amazing Slack community that's very active. The German group is active as well, the doc group. Just to connect with your peers, ask questions, and what we're all about, right? I'll stop sharing my screen. Is just about learning and growing and connecting. I mean, that's really one of the benefits. It's hard to call it benefits for the pandemic, but this whole virtual world, right? We've kind of taken down barriers and allowed people to get to know each other in ways that they couldn't before. And so really that's what PreSales Collective is all about. And that's all I have to say today. I appreciate your time. Just give you a quick highlight, and I'm open for any thoughts, any questions that I can answer.
First of all, thank you so much, James. And I think myself, Tim, and also Ricardo, we have been part of it from not the very beginning, but the beginning.
Pretty early.
I would, yeah, pretty early, definitely. And we have seen like all that development and all that growth, and it was getting bigger and bigger, right? So when you started, you have still been employed with a company, and it was like a hobby project, and then it moved into something totally different. So I would say let's open it up for the crowd. And you mentioned a couple of topics. So here to provide opportunities. So if people are willing to contribute or stand up or share topics, you have the podcast, you have webinars, you have the blog, and all that stuff, which I think is great. And I'm not sure if everyone is aware of it, but I would highly encourage you, if you have a topic you love or you would like to talk about, just reach out or use the process James just mentioned and contribute, right?
Yep. Yeah, we have this new process, right? I have so many people that raise their hand and say, hey, how do I get involved? How do I present? So presalescollective.com/contribute. You can suggest a topic, even if you don't even want to present, you just want to see content on a specific topic, you can do that. If you have an article that you've written, English or German, that you'd like to get shared around, we can do that. Even if you have a document or an asset, right? Like how to build KPIs, right? Or how to do ratio planning, you can submit that. And then also when it's safe, host local events, right? We want to get people together, even if it's just for a couple people together for coffee or for beer or whatever it might be, just building those relationships in person.
Right. So I would open it up to the crowd, and I believe most of the folks on the Stammtisch calls have also been involved in the Slack channel and knowing the website and may have having seen the webinars or listened to the podcast. So what questions do you guys have, or maybe what kind of feedback you are willing to provide to James?
Anybody?
Maybe then I'll start. Maybe I can say thank you. I think I took at least, 2 of the kind of learning center courses, the technical enablement course and the value-based selling course. And I think similar to many here in the group, I've had no idea what pre-sales is. I started as a pre-sales consultant 3.5 years ago. I was promoted to a senior pre-sales consultant 2 years later, and since half a year, I'm leading a team covering the EMEA region. And I think it's really great having, aside from, of course, my onboarding, I've just onboarded 2 team members, very focused on our software and its capabilities. It's great to have content that actually is focusing on the role. That provides technical experience, a platform for sharing ideas. I'm keen on also seeing the account executive and pre-sales collaboration kind of course. And I think it's just for our entire profession. I think it's a great platform. So thanks for that.
Well, thanks for the kind words. Congratulations to you on that path, right? You know, that's something that we hear quite frequently. It's actually this amazing vantage point that I get to see because I get to talk to so many people, is that similar situations, didn't know what the role was, didn't even know it existed, got thrown into it, were successful, but kind of just learned on the fly. And so we feel like we could provide resources like the enablement. I'm glad you have good feedback on that. And sometimes, you know, the promotion to leadership and other opportunities. And so we want to be here to support people because, you know, what's so interesting, right, is that, Sarah, like you said, you kind of like stumbled into it, right? A lot of companies, and not everybody, will be like, oh, well, they're the smart people, they'll figure it out, right? And they give all the training and the resources and the enablement to some of the other groups. But we don't feel that that's totally right. And so we want to be able to provide this platform of help and learning and networking and enablement, regardless of where you are in your career and regardless at what company that you're at, because we've learned and believe that it doesn't, you know, matters, but it doesn't matter, right? You can still learn from people who are doing the same things as you, even though it might not be the same challenge day to day. So thanks for the kind words, Sarah. I appreciate your engagement and involvement.
Thank you, Sarah.
Maybe one question from my side. And I think, Sarah, you gave the right idea for my question, because you also mentioned sales, right? And looking at the courses that you just sent around, James, there's one that is specifically focusing on the sales partnerships, which of course is a very crucial part to our job description, to collaborate with our AEs together. Now, looking at the sphere of the internets, there's obviously also communities for sales, right? I'm thinking about like the Revenue Collective, which I think they relabeled themselves as Pavilion. And I'm looking at the group that is here today, like Günther, Max, Moritz, and maybe a couple of others who are working as an AE. Is there any plans to bring those communities maybe on specific notions together to facilitate the cooperation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I have a rule that I'm only allowed to say great question 1 time per call, right? That's my SE rule. So I did just use it, Tim, apologize. for anybody else.
No, I feel honored to receive the one-time great question.
That's my SE role. We have gone back and forth on like, how much and how often we should collaborate with these other communities, in transparency, right? To my core, I really believe in fundamentally continuing to provide resources for pre-sales. And we've actually done a couple things with these companies, at least talked to them. I don't want it to, the noise, or let me say, I don't want pre-sales to get drowned out per se, right? I don't want it to be like, hey, this is about salespeople and go-to-market people, but really giving pre-sales and sales engineering their place. And so we'll continue to do things here and there, but we are really focused on making sure that sales engineers have their own community and their own offering, and feel like that's the priority, while some of the other things happen a couple times a year. And Tim, maybe I'll add on that is, I was actually talking to a company this morning. There's a lot of, conversations around product-led growth, PLG, and how some of these products, these companies are coming to market. And there's a lot of collaboration needed between, sales and pre-sales and product marketing, and how are these communities coming together to essentially put a demo on a website, right? Or to put a video demo in the hands of a seller in the sales process. So we're trying to play our role there, because again, we want to make sure that SEs are seen as equals across, versus just the sales support, right? That's this big component that we continue to stress and emphasize.
Thank you.
Any thoughts on my response?
I was going to
Putting you
ask
on the hot seat.
a question in case there is no feedback. I was wondering, James, now it's been almost a year, and if you look in the rearview mirror now, what was the thing that stuck out the most, where you were surprised the most, how it went well or not at all?
Oh, wow. A lot. I've learned a lot. I feel like I've gone through a lot of growth in the last year. But I will say the podcast, surprisingly, has been, one of my favorite things that has happened, that has made the most impact and actually been the most challenging. I think the group here can attest to that, when you have something happening weekly or bi-weekly, and making sure that you bring your best foot forward every single time that you're doing that, it actually is really hard. But it's so interesting. I get so many messages on LinkedIn or in Slack about the podcast, about how the podcast has helped people find jobs or help them prepare for a promotion, or they didn't even join, Pre-Sales Academy didn't join. They learned about the profession through the podcast. And so I realized the impact that medium is making. And that's why I've been kind of like publicizing a bit, that I feel like we're hitting our 100,000 listens in only 86 episodes. So it's pretty amazing that has grown, and it's a lot of hard work, but it's really a lot of the validation that made us continue to do more and more and more. Because I will say, like, we do so much, and it's amazing to hear and see the impact, but feedback, good, bad, ugly, it comes through, but not all the time. And so when you get those like nuggets of feedback and people give you specific examples of how these things have helped you out, it really just kind of validates and gives us energy to continue going.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I think that was the podcast was actually one of the reasons why I knew that it was worth quitting my full-time job and the security that I had to go full-time, because of the impact and the messages from people I never talked to that it was making. So. Does anybody have any feedback, anything that they'd like to see more of? Or see generally, or questions that they have about the profession that you think PreSales Collective can tackle? And if you don't feel comfortable speaking up on the call, you can always message me in Slack or chat me in Zoom. But I always like to ask these questions. I'm an SE, I'm curious.
That is typically the moment where James realizes, yeah, that's a German call.
I know this is an EMEA topic probably, but I think localization is a very tricky thing for us when you have, or when you're dealing with like a team like myself, where we are all generalists. We're not specialists in the software. So we have a lot of extensions, a lot of mobile apps. We have an ERP system. So it's CRM to full financial. So we're basically very generalist. And we have the language component. So we have to cover very different markets with very different languages. This is, of course, nothing that our US or APAC colleagues have to deal with necessarily, aside from the APAC teams who have localized teams in like the China region. But I think it's always tricky, the generalist specialist topic, and it's just so much easier in the English speaking world. And I think we just always in our regions have to really, when we recruit, have to make sure what somebody brings as a candidate from a language skill, from a technological background. I think that's just super tricky. I can say now from a recruiting perspective, but that's probably something we can discuss, especially like in our localized chapters.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because actually Tim and Jan joined me for one of my first podcasts, and we talked about branching out into EMEA. And I actually feel very privileged, because my first startup that I worked at, a company called Revenate, was hospitality technology. I was based in San Francisco, but my territory was Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And so that's where I got to travel Europe and spend some time meeting with those customers. It was the first time I got exposed to international customers. And then when I worked for Showpad, which was a Belgium-based company, I learned so much more, because a lot of the US colleagues will be like, oh, well, yeah, it's no problem. Like, oh, you need a product marketing spec in German. We'll just translate the English version to German. And it doesn't actually work like that, right? And I think that I'm very fortunate that I've been able to see that situation that you've mentioned. And it's really hard. And I think a lot of times US dominant companies don't understand the complexities and the intricacies that need to happen with localization, especially as they're smaller, like satellite offices or satellite teams. You're asking people to do so much, and you're trying to treat them like they're a US operating organization. And it's definitely a challenge. And I think that's why, personally with PreSales Collective, I wanted to make sure that we weren't like, hey, we're a global community, but we're like so US centric. I mean, it is to a point, but people like Ricardo, Tim, and Jan have really helped us in terms of PreSales Collective gain international exposure. And we have that through a number of different leaders and now an ambassador program. And we have folks that speak multiple different languages for that. So it's a very interesting topic. And I think like one of my jobs is to continue to bring awareness to like US based leaders who have international teams that like, hey, it's not that easy, right? But I also feel like that's like part of my job, right? That's part of my job leading the PreSales Collective.
So James, there's a question in the chat as well. I'm not sure if you have seen it, but the question basically is, how can one transition from being a developer or engineer to being a pre-sales engineer?
That is a very fair question.
Maybe you can give a perspective from your end. I know Tim and myself, we also did an episode with someone who was a software developer and moved into being a pre-sales engineer. I will share it in the chat as well. So maybe you would like to listen to that episode, or even contact Severin, who was our guest and shared his experience as well.
Yeah, it sounds like that episode will be really impactful. I like to tell people all the time, like, you have some sort of subject matter expertise. You're known for something. You have some sort of whatever it is that you would call yourself an expert in, or compare yourself better than others. So for example, like, I don't come from a technology background. I worked in hospitality. I worked in hotels. Actually, in Germany, Rocco Forte Hotels was one of my clients for quite some time. And so when I wanted to make the jump to software, I went to a hospitality technology company, right? Because I was a subject matter expert of hotels and brought that to the hospitality and learned the technical role. And I think that developer engineer is a tough transition, but one of the easier ones, especially if you can find a company that maybe works in the DevOps segment or one of the companies that is a fairly technical product. They're maybe less reliant on the business savvy sales engineers and more reliant on the technical sales engineers. And that's always a great transition, in my opinion, because if the role requires hands on the keyboard, you're already in a really good position. And then you can always transition to a different role or a different segment or a different company. And so taking that, first step and relying on your expertise is always my suggestion.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, I mean, a couple of years ago, I actually looked at Google Cloud Platform and AWS as potential employers, because they also have pre-sales roles. But I decided against it because for me, it's way too technical. But it's still called a solution consultant, it's still called a sales engineer, and there's an entrepreneurial side to it. But as James said, it's very hands-on. You sometimes even have to configure databases, program scripts, and stuff like that in that capacity. And that could be maybe a potential transition point.
Mm-hmm. Good call out.
You sort of segued there into my question, or rather remark that I would have. I'm new, by the way, first time. Which is similar to James. I came to pre-sales with like no technical background, as I like to think about it personally. Even though over my years, first in solution sales and then in actual pre-sales, I never had an issue talking to the technical guys on the client side. What I not quite struggled with, but what I've experienced when looking for like new job, is that the first thing I have to clarify is that level of technicality. So I get approached by recruiters who say, hey, we're looking for a technical pre-sales role, blah, blah, blah. You seem like a great fit. And the first thing I have to say is, like, what level of technical engagement do you expect? Because I can't program, right? I have no issues following a client engagement through from A to Z. But that's sort of where it ends. So if it becomes a question of, hey, can you program this in that demo environment? Can you stand up a software by basically installing it, and it's a super technical job? So that's usually where I have to draw the line, say, guys, I can't do that, right? I bring like business perspective to this role. And I think that's also sort of the answer to the question just now, is if you can bring that technical expertise, then you have a very good fit for a lot of pre-sales roles where people like myself have like no fit whatsoever.
It's a great call out, Eric.
Well, also why it was a remark, I actually completely forgot, is maybe you guys can basically help people out with basically publishing some guidance, which goes into that detail, because I think it would help out people like myself who, well, I've by now made that experience that I have to approach a job like this, but maybe also for other guys who come from technical side to, I don't know, provide some guidance and basically say, this is what you need to look out for when you look for a pre-sales job, whether it's more business focused, whether it's more tech focused, who do you sell to, who are your counterparts on the customer side.
Yeah, it's a great call out. And actually one of the things we want to do with the member portal, right, is that if you sign up and you say, I'm an aspiring pre-sales professional, your experience will have a lot of that content that gives the advice. And we're actually trying to put some of that on our Pre-Sales Academy website, because, our vision is that it's not just the bootcamp reskilling program that we run, but anybody who wants to get into the profession, you'll have kind of the blueprint to get a job. So it's a really good call out, Eric.
So James, maybe then one additional question in regards to the PSC. So obviously it has somewhat transitioned from being a community to also being a company, right? And obviously there's a strong, well, the community is the most important aspect to it. But that being said, you have the Pre-Sales Academy, which is a program that people can subscribe to. And obviously there's attached a cost to it and so on. I don't know how much you can or want to share just in terms of how will the PSC continue to work with sort of, let's say, cost-free content and things that are going to have, I don't know, a membership, some sort of subscription attached to it. That would be quite interesting.
It's a great question. So I used.
You can't say that.
I used it on you already. I do get this question, right? Is that when's PreSales Collective going to charge me to join? The answer is that we have no plans to charge. I want to make PreSales Collective free. I want to say it's free forever, right? I can't see a crystal ball, but like that is our plan. And even actually to your question earlier, Tim, about partnerships, like some of those other communities, they have charging models and charging mechanisms. And that's why I said no to doing some deeper partnerships, because I believe that all content should be free for the PreSales Collective. So we will always have, our plan is to always have a free model. We do have a paid leadership collective, but it's not what's building out our business, right? We did create PreSales Academy to create more of a business that allows us to grow and make sure that our community can be funded and supported through hires and hiring. And then we do a lot of sponsorships with companies that are trying to sell to pre-sales professionals. And so that is really the way that we'll continue to grow. The problem with that is it's a bit unpredictable from a business model perspective. You don't necessarily know what companies are going to have funding, what their funding is going to be, what they would allocate toward PreSales Collective, which is also why we created the Academy, to make sure that PreSales Collective can always live on in whatever capacity. And so we will continue to create more offerings, but PreSales Collective, the plan is to keep it free forever. That is something I believe to my core. I've actually had a lot of people say, "Hey, James, you could charge for this and make money for this." It's not about money. If Eugene and I created PreSales Academy with or thought about this with money in mind, we probably would have stayed at companies like Outreach and Salesforce, right? It's not really about that. It's about impact and moving a profession forward. So thanks for that question, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for the clarity.
Anybody, anything?
Silence.
No. Like good salespeople, we've learned how to work through silence, right?
Exactly.
And again, if you don't feel comfortable sharing anything, you can let me know in Slack.
I mean, always. I think always people can reach out to you, but maybe we can turn it around. So, I mean, you got some questions, you got some feedback, but maybe you also have questions or thoughts or maybe wishes to the members of PreSales Collective. So, from your perspective, how can we best contribute to what you just said, right? Growing that profession, giving all of us a place and helping people grow.
Thanks for asking that question. We've talked about this a little bit. I've talked about it with Patrick Basang as well. Pre-sales is on a different maturity model depending on where you're at in the globe. And most of the Pre-sales Leadership Collective members will say that the European approach to pre-sales is a couple years behind North America. And we want to help change that. And so I think an ask that I have, right, is open up the dialogue, open up the discussion, right? Like if you feel like, your organization is behind in the approach, right? You feel like it's kind of this sales assistant role. It's not respected enough. It's not compensated fairly. Bring those things to Ricardo, Tim, and Jan's attention, bring them to my attention. Because one of the things that we've actually talked about as a group in private a couple months ago is what can we do from the PreSales Collective to help give the DACH region more resources to transform the role. Because with a transformed role comes better job affinity, it comes better compensation, better benefits, better recognition, better career path, better career trajectory. And so, my ask would be to open up the dialogue. I know that a lot of time we get a little bit nervous per se to talk about what happens within our company and within our four walls, but I think it's actually a little bit it's a little bit refreshing when you start talking about things that happen in your day to day with other people at other companies that are part of some of the best companies in the world that you think everything is perfect over there, but in reality it isn't. And so my ask would be, if you have an opinion on this subject or have some observations on where Germany and DACH and German speaking teams and organizations are and where they can improve, like please reach out to me and let me know. We want to help be able to give you content, whether you're an individual contributor to give to your boss, or you're a leader that you want to give to your sales leader or your executive to say, hey, this is how we should be doing things. That is what we like to see, right? We want you to be able to just raise your hand to say, hey, I need this, I want this, give us some details and let us go in action. So Jan, is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, definitely.
I will tell people, right, for better or for worse, like this is my life. I love this job. Like I love this role. I love this profession. I think for so long it's been overutilized and under-resourced and not given it what it needs. And, I did this on my podcast this week. I'm doing 5 monologue podcasts over January where I'm talking about certain subjects. And yesterday's was the shift in B2B sales. And sales is changing. People are doing their homework. Consumer behaviors are shifting, right? Some regions more so than others. But this role is going to be very, very important. The future of sales, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. And so, we as PreSales Collective want to help be on the forefront of change, right? Of change so that we can look back in 10 or 20 years and say, oh, wow, PreSales Collective and all of its members help change a profession and help change the way sales happened. Because if you think about incentives, right? Direct sales reps aren't necessarily as incentivized to go and change the way sales processes happen. Pre-sales professionals are a little bit more incentivized to do that based off what is not happening. And so that's our premise and that's our perspective. And this is what we're really passionate about.
Maybe I can just give one example. The latest, was it the consensus compensation study, the pre-sales kind of study? This is also something that basically I look into and say, what do similar companies in the software environment, what KPIs do they use for tracking? What is the average compensation? I mean, we have offices in APAC and the Americas that we can compare ourselves against. What was it, the average unqualified demos, one of my favorite statistics, or, demos that actually shouldn't take place. What is the average demo that it takes to a deal? What is the language capabilities? How many products do one pre-sales consultant support in a team? Just having access to that data is giving me a lot of power within my organization to justify an additional hire, an additional specialization, a change in compensation schemes, OTE targets. So it's really, I think, it took me a while to find it, but I think it's great that we now have this centralized community where, I can dip into this pool and find those stats.
So it's a great point and great call out. And that's what hasn't existed, right? And with PreSales Collective helping create an ecosystem, you can have access to that information. And as you said, you have a little more power to make change within your company. It's great.
Hey, James, it's Marco speaking. I would have a quick question. Do you have something like a role model? Has there been a profession that has, through this collaboration already done something similar like the PreSales Collective is doing now?
Oh, so that's a wonderful question. See how the role model, actually not necessarily in pre-sales per se, but I am a Mark Benioff fan. I actually went to go work for Salesforce because I really wanted to work for a Mark Benioff owned company and run company. And I actually got to see his leadership happen during the pandemic. And the reason why I really like Mark is that Mark has this concept of stakeholder capitalism, And it's a lot different than what the normal stock market and executives will tell you. This is all about shareholders, and shareholders provide value. But if you look at Mark and how his approach to customers and clients and his employees have come, he's really bucked a trend. And occasionally some analysis or analysts in the stock market will hold it against him. But I really respect what he's doing and what he's done, and he's one of my personal inspirations.
Nice.
Eckert, I saw that you were off mute previously. Did you have something to say?
Yes, I was a little bit late on the call, so sorry for that. But I'm wondering a little bit about, you talk always about one pre-sales job. I think there are different kind of jobs in pre-sales. So in our large organization, we have EMEA-based jobs, we have US jobs in pre-sales, we have local jobs, we have jobs pre-sales, especially for large customers and so on. So also the job is different, the job role. So we have some colleagues which go in to very yes, they go into details of each product, and they make a lot of demos. So others like me, I work more for large customers, and I take care of them, that they are satisfied with the products and so on. So I think there are different kind of roles inside pre-sales. How do you deal with that, James?
Wow. I thank you for asking that question. I think for us, right, I have a nice 7-foot whiteboard on my office wall over here. I love it, right? I get on my whiteboard and right, we actually I have something circled and starred called standards. And what we want to be able to do in 2022 and into 2023 is be able to provide some guidance or standards on how the role is different across the world, across companies, across products. Because, to your point, if you're a sales engineer for a single product startup that is a transactional sale, it is very, very different than a multi-platform sales engineer selling to the enterprise at like a company like Salesforce or SAP, right? IBM. And I'm glad you brought that up, because this has actually been one of I have an opinion here that a lot of people disagree with, is that I do not always believe that, SMB to mid-market to general business to enterprise is a career progression, because everyone is different. Everyone could be better at different selling motions. I personally don't love the enterprise motion. I like fast-moving clients that only have a couple of calls, that give me early access to a couple of stakeholders and executive teams. Some people like, only managing 1 or 2 customers. And so we believe that through, again, conversations like this, we can start to put a little bit more guidance out there. And even the roles, sales engineers, solution consultants, system engineers, they're all over the place. How can we help have those conversations that are a little bit more formalized? Because we actually believe that is what will allow this profession to grow, is a little bit more standardization or guidance on how you approach the role company to company. Not, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, but it's a very good point. And that's why for a lot of our events, we do try to bring in different, roles, different company sizes, different perspectives to make sure things balance out.
Mm-hmm. I think the most important is to work as a team. This is, I think, the most important part of all. So we have the ball, and we pass the ball from one person to another, and each person can bring benefit into the sales cycle.
Absolutely, and team selling is really hard, right? It's not very easy, and everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses, even from sellers to sales engineers. And so how you make that all work together is very important.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Tim is smiling, but silence works. All right. I mean, we are close to the hour. So any final question, any final thoughts?
Actually, I have a comment, James. I think it was super interesting what you said also on what you're kind of asking from the community. Looking forward to like having people saying, actually like giving feedback when they're in a bad pre-sales position or something. I have to admit, I have no clue, you know. I think you're often in your company bubble, and I think I'm in a privileged company bubble, but it's why it's so important to have these events like today. And I it's my first time, that's why I've not been contributing that much, but I'm looking forward to much more interaction between companies. And particularly in Germany, I often have the feeling that if you start talking to other companies, it feels like you're breaching loyalty. Do you want to move? Maybe you don't even want to do that. You just want to get to know what other people are actually doing. Because I mean, we have the issue, and I think actually it was it Eric who said it, like people advertising roles as a technical solution engineer, and you have to clarify the technicality, which is so personal. And I feel like we need to open up much more. And I think that's what I'm wishing for our community, particularly in Germany, that we stop having the standard of not talking to each other, not being completely transparent about salaries, career opportunities, and having a drive to move on. And that leaving a company doesn't mean not being loyal, but actually just caring for yourself and watching out, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. I really, is it Paya?
It's Pia, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for adding that. I think it's a really good point. And you know, I think this has been the journey that I've gone on. Is I'm still working on the equation, right? But it's problem solving plus outside perspectives equals innovation. As once you start talking to other people who are doing similar things, it either validates what you're already doing and makes you like, oh, we're maybe doing it right, or makes you question and say maybe we should reapproach. And I do think there is a massive shift happening in the world, and the pandemic has accelerated it. That it's not necessarily loyalty, and I want to say this the right way. It's not necessarily about loyalty to your company anymore, but loyalty to yourself, and making sure that you're bringing the best version of yourself to your job every single day. And we're going to change companies. That is actually why I have always been one of those people that when someone resigns at my company, I'm super excited for them and happy for them, because I've already worked at 10 different companies in my life. Companies will come and go, but friendships and relationships will stay. And I think that shift will continue to happen. And the more we share, the more we learn, and the more it'll help us in our day-to-day. So thanks for adding that. And I sometimes joke that I'm in pre-sales la la land, but I firmly believe that that is fundamental to the success of this profession.
To take it even further, I often say I want everyone around me to look what other people are doing and what other companies are doing. So when we had a new release now, I want to know, how is Salesforce communicating their new release? How is SAP communicating their new release? What are they doing that we're not doing? Or what do I really like? And what, could we take that they do? And I think that's something, when I'm in a demo and we're competing against SAP and Salesforce, as a technical advisor, I want to say, this is where Salesforce and SAP are better. But in the general concept and in your set of circumstance, this is the best package, and it sometimes means an integration. But if I don't know what the others are doing, I'm lost. So I think it's extremely important to not stay in a company bubble. And that doesn't mean you're disloyal. It actually means you're seeking inspiration and learnings from wherever parts of companies, people, the way they do their jobs.
Fantastic. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, so I had a couple instances over my work life, mostly internally in my company, where I've sometimes been arguing that technically the customer shouldn't talk to us, we shouldn't talk to the customer, because technically they would be better off with a competitor, which I think is a very, very hard message to bring across internally, right? And I think I would personally like it if we can get to a stage where that's more normal, this type of consultative selling also to a client, because I like to think if you're open and honest today and it somehow doesn't work out, obviously it depends on how broad your offering is. If you have a point solution, you're shutting the door. But if you have a broader offering, you might just line yourself up for a future sale because they come back to you and they say, well, you've been honest back then, and you could come in now and talk to us because we have grown to a point where it makes sense for our companies to engage.
Absolutely.
And I think it helps to exchange via venues like this to also understand what competitors offer so that you're to some level, obviously, able to also advise the client on what makes sense for them at any given point in time.
I agree. That's why I like to call this role a customer-centric problem solver, because it's not necessarily just solving problems, but you're putting this customer at the center. And I brought this up on my podcast. Sometimes that's technology, but sometimes that's process, right? Like as Sarah mentioned too, sometimes it's integration. And when you take the sales out of things and put someone at the center, there's just this magic that happens and the light bulbs go off. And that's, I think, why a lot of us do what we do. I know we're out of time, but I just want to say thanks for having me. Like I really appreciate everyone listening to this in English and giving me an opportunity to talk about PreSales Collective and what we're doing as a community. I would welcome, again, in a one-on-one message, an email, presalescollective.com, contribute. Raise your hand, even if you don't want to actually action on something, but just have an idea that you'd like to see. This is why we have a 6-person organization to be able to grow and do these things. And we actually have a number of part-time people who help out as well. And so thank you all for joining and thanks for being part of the PreSales Collective. And really, thanks for being part of the movement on this amazing profession. So,
thank you so much, James, for taking the time, for sharing, for answering, for giving your thoughts. Highly appreciate it. And I think it was a long warm-up today, but at the end, everyone was speaking up and participating. And I think it's similar for the Stammtisch. So I just posted the link into the chat. So I think we already have a pretty cool lineup for the next couple of months. But if there is a topic you would like to talk about where you say, hey, I can come and give an intro on it and we have some discussions around it, just reach out to Ricardo, Tim, or myself. You're more than welcome. And yeah, I think with that, we can just say thank you to all of you for spending your private time for the Stammtisch and wishing every one of you a great evening.
Absolutely. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
James.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Yes.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.